This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. A huge haul of cocaine. Federal agents in California today talked up a record-setting drug bust, 20 tons of cocaine. The seizure underscored just how much cocaine is still being poured into this country by the drug criminals, the untold tons that are still getting through to the streets and brains of Americans, especially the young, and how hard it's going to be to turn that around. David Dow reports.
Authorities say a citizen's tip led them to the warehouse in a North Los Angeles suburb where they made the largest cocaine seizure in history. At least 20 tons, with a street value that could range as high as $20 billion.
It gave me really cold chills when I walked in and looked at it, and the magnitude of it has really not sunk into me yet.
It's enormous, and it's going to bring tears to a lot of people's eyes tonight because it's not going to be on the street.
Police also seized $10 to $20 million in cash, plus a truck that may have been used to transport the drugs. And they arrested 3 men who claimed to be Mexican. Investigators believe the cocaine came from Colombia's 2 largest drug cartels, and this warehouse was a national distribution center.
We are trying to send a message back to the Colombian cartels that we are not going to allow them to take over the United States.
Officials say the bust was big enough to have at least a regional effect on the price and supply of cocaine.
This will make a dent. But the unfortunate part of it is that probably it is not a major dent.
We don't know how many such warehouses are around here. And this is one, and it's a hell of a lot of drugs. But there's a lot more out there, and nobody really knows how much there is.
Today's seizure is nearly twice as large as the previous world record and lends weight to Southern California's growing reputation as a major pathway for cocaine smugglers. David Dow, CBS News, Los Angeles.
President Bush flew to South Carolina today to see the damage done by Hurricane Hugo, to see and be seen. He landed in the eye of a storm of criticism from local officials and citizens that his response to the disaster has been too little, too late, and badly bungled. State officials also come in for criticism. The president said he could, quote, understand their frustration. Wyatt Andrews begins our coverage of disaster relief and damage control.
1 week after Hugo slammed into South Carolina, President Bush spent 2 hours on a media tour of some hard-hit neighborhoods outside of Charleston. He brought with him a freshly signed billion-dollar federal loan and aid package and a personal donation of $1,000.
I'm so impressed about your spirit. My heavens.
Well, if you're alive after this, that's all you care.
The president praised the National Guard in particular and stopped to thank the troops helping the cleanup.
Good luck.
Mr. President. Despite this show of presidential concern, many are asking where President Bush has been. Shades of the Alaska oil spill, many here say that the federal response in South Carolina has been slow and ineffective.
I think it's about time that the president got here.
What do you mean by that?
He should have been here earlier. He could have enforced a lot more help sooner if he had seen it sooner.
The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, has faced the most criticism for delays in organizing the cleanup and the distribution of aid, while 22 counties lack adequate power and water.
Instead of them gearing up, they said, well, send us the forms and call us on the line. There's no forms, there's no office.
The president and the state's Republican governor brushed off the criticism.
I can understand the frustration of the 1 or 2 voices that have been critical because they've been up all night and they've been worried.
And the president's absolutely right. You can't turn the lights on overnight when the whole system's destroyed. You can't rebuild the sewer when it's destroyed.
But the very sweep of Hugo's destruction is exactly why critics see a pattern with the Alaska oil spill. Disasters where Mr. Bush was quick to praise the federal response, while residents wondered if he grasped the extent of the damage. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Summerville, South Carolina.
Okay, y'all just stay in line.
During the president's visit, the food stamp line moved only a few feet. It starts at the highway overpass and ends 2,000 people later.
Sick people and poor people and old people, you know, have to stand in line like this for hours.
Your roof was damaged?
The food stamp office is just one of the new hurricane relief centers overwhelmed by the numbers of the needy. 50,000 homeless, 250,000 unemployed.
Why don't you have a seat over there, dear? You're number 44.
Employees of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, opened relief offices in the dark while the agency studied the need for generators. The offices helped storm victims apply for federal aid, but today, the homeless were told to come back for their appointment in 10 days.
Well, what I'm interested in is, what does FEMA do?
What I do now? I just go back and wait like I've been waiting, I reckon, you know. Stay here and there, wherever I can stay.
Why does it take so long?
Bureaucracy and the red tape that you have to go through.
We did not anticipate, and we were not prepared to respond to a Hugo that totally wiped out one island, severe damage to another, and then coast in all of this within 1 week.
Lines stretch for blocks and hours. Some find offices close after they have waited all day.
We lost the whole day of gathering water, ice, and any other food. And then what? We got a curfew at 8 o'clock? It's not fair.
For others, the continuing misery is too much. This pregnant woman fainted. More than a week after the hurricane, Charleston is still a city of shortages as relief efforts move slowly forward. Scott Pelley, CBS News, Charleston.
The chairman of the U.S. Military Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral William Crowell, retired today. Retirement ceremonies at the U.S. Naval Academy's Warden Field with full military honors. President Bush was there for the final salute to Crowell's brilliant military career, a half-century of service that Crowell himself today called a wonderful adventure. Still to come on the CBS Evening News, on the eve of the 40th anniversary of Chinese communist rule. Reports from correspondents Susan Spencer and John Sheehan. As we continue our special coverage from inside China, setting back the clock. Over her Rolls Royce. This was the most celebrated misdemeanor case in recent memory. Zsa Zsa Gabor will be sentenced next month. She could get up to 16 months in jail and a $3,000 fine. Jim Bakker testified for the first time today at his criminal trial in Charlotte, North Carolina. The TV preacher insisted it was God who told him to build a Christian retreat and theme park. It was paid for by contributors Bakker is now accused of defrauding. Bruce Hall reports on Bakker's day in court.
With his judgment day near, Jim Bakker took the witness stand in his own defense today as his fraud and conspiracy trial entered its second month. Bakker testified that PTL was inspired by a vision from God that came to him in the middle of the night. Looking directly at the jury, a confident Bakker said that had he been allowed to complete his plans, God would have provided the money he needed to build 211,000 hotel rooms and campground spaces at PTL. More than enough to accommodate the ministry's 153,000 lifetime partners Bakker is accused of defrauding. When asked by attorney George Davis if he ever intentionally committed fraud, Bakker responded, absolutely not. Davis, did you conspire with others to commit a conspiracy? Bakker, no, I did not. In a grueling cross-examination, government prosecutor Deborah Smith accused Bakker of being a liar, a cheat, a man who conned thousands of followers out of their savings. Under intense questioning about everything from his personal life to financial matters at PTL, Bakker responded repeatedly, I don't recall, I don't know, or I have no recollection.
Thank you, Jesus.
With Bakker's defense winding down, the vigil by his supporters outside the courthouse is growing. Most are convinced that God will intercede on Bakker's behalf.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm here. I'm a witness that he gonna work a miracle for Jim Bakker.
Bakker's fate is expected to be in the hands of the jury next week. That jury will decide whether Bakker walks away a free man or does the rest of his preaching in prison. Bruce Hall, CBS News, Charlotte.
In Washington, a congressional compromise today amid the latest national debate over what's art and what's obscene, what's censorship, and where your tax money goes. Linda Tyra reports on the art of politics and the politics of art.
If the essence of art is to provoke and stir emotions, that's precisely what the photographs of Robert Mapplethorpe have done. After a controversial taxpayer subsidy of a Mapplethorpe show, congressional negotiators today agreed to ban federal funds for obscene art. The point man behind the ban, conservative Jesse Helms. Last night, Helms said he may have to show some Mapplethorpe photos, but warned it might be a bit delicate.
I'm going to ask that all the pages and all the ladies, maybe all of the staff, leave the chamber.
Helms never did have the chamber cleared, but today he continued his anti-Mapplethorpe campaign.
How can you engage in sadomasochism, homoeroticism, the sexual exploitation of children or individuals engaged in you-know-what, without its being obscene?
Certainly the senator from North Carolina wouldn't be standing on the floor saying that something that Michelangelo did, that's obscene just because it portrays sexual relations between two human beings.
Now, I don't know that Michelangelo got any federal funds for what he did.
Under the congressional agreement, the two biggest federal underwriters of the arts, the National Endowment for the Arts and the National Endowment for the Humanities, would withhold money for material judged to be obscene. A joint congressional and presidential panel would decide guidelines for what is obscene. An arts advocate said the community could live with the agreement.
So you're happy with today's action? This is what you would have wanted?
Oh, no, but my name's not Dorothy and I'm not Naz.
This agreement is likely to win final approval, a warning that art does indeed have its limits, at least in the eyes of the government. Linda Tyra, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
August Anheuser Busch, Jr., patriarch of a beer family and a sportsman, died today in St. Louis. Known as Gussy Bush, he was president of the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team and until 1975, head of the Anheuser Busch brewery. Gussy Bush was 90 years old. Marks the 40th anniversary of its communist revolution this weekend, with the government still struggling desperately to try to put down a movement for freedom and democracy. The new Communist Party chief, Jiang Zemin, admitted today that the movement still has wide support among the people. He said communism would win in the end, but he predicted a long struggle. Tonight we continue our series, Inside China, setting back the clock. Our first report will be from John Sheehan in Beijing on the Communist Party's struggle against freedom and democracy.
This is a command performance. University students in Beijing who say they took part in the pro-democracy movement trotted out in front of foreign journalists to admit the error of their ways. The students, chosen by school officials, renounced the fervor of last spring's marches. Now they parrot the government line that most students were deceived and manipulated by a small number of people trying to bring down the government. In a discussion led by party officials, student Xu Wei claims he was one of the last to leave Tiananmen Square. He says that he was wrong to demonstrate and that the leaders of the student movement should be thrown in jail. Many students have been released after days or weeks in police custody and have been told that they remain under investigation.
People's records follow them wherever they go in this country. We know that, in our own country, there are people who have FBI dossiers and CIA dossiers, but here everybody has a dossier.
The tranquil appearance of the campuses is deceptive. Beneath the surface is a network of informers in classrooms and dormitories. And the government is threatening to make every student do 1 to 3 years of military service or manual labor. Since the massacre, political indoctrination classes for students and faculty have been increased to at least 2 per week. In this one at Tsinghua University, party officials and martial law soldiers hammer home the government line, that the protesters were the aggressors who martyred patriotic soldiers. The Tiananmen massacre never happened. Adding to the intimidation, state-run TV shows people arrested and even executed. For now, the democracy movement on campus is broken. In the atmosphere of terror and brainwashing, students go through the motions of whatever the government demands.
We see that the drastic punishments are real, so we are terrified. If you tell us to write or say that the demonstrations were a type of uprising and give it to the government or the school, we will. We must protect ourselves.
Fear of being identified and punished is widespread. This student insists on wearing a hat so that not even his haircut will be visible.
Can they make you think what they want you to think?
It is impossible. They can never make us change our minds.
What will happen to you if the authorities find out that you talked to an American correspondent?
I think I would be put in prison.
On campuses throughout the country, China's leaders are systematically trying to squelch the idea that education is supposed to teach young people to think for themselves. Resignation has settled on the universities, a reluctant acceptance that for years to come, guns and tanks will be stronger than dreams of democracy. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
If you've got dental work, you've got three
caught in their contradictory words about the West. On the one hand, they say they want to stamp out Western ideas of political freedom. On the other hand, they want money and technology from the West, so they want to go ahead with free trade and business dealings with the West. Keeping in mind what a huge country China is, and that most of the population is centered along the coast, know that over the last few years, as part of the economic plan run out of the capital of Beijing, a string of special business zones was created all along the coast, wide open to Western trade and investment. Now, when we went to China in May, before the massacre, these areas were booming, playing a major role in China's economic growth. One of the biggest and most prosperous was here in Fujian. That's on the south coast, a province down here. Susan Spencer went back to Fujian recently for this report.
On China's south coast, more than 1,000 miles away from the old men in Beijing, life goes on. And life around here has always meant business. Citizens, the voice says, must turn in the bad elements to party leaders. No one seems to be listening. Signs remind everyone that those who confess to their crimes will be treated leniently. Nobody seems to be reading them. Politics isn't much on people's minds here. Prosperity is, and prosperity is what's at risk, as banks, investors, even tourists take a hard look at the hardliners.
They're all very much afraid of what's happening in China now, and they're worried because it's difficult to predict. The feeling outside of China is that Beijing doesn't have its act together yet.
As a special economic zone where experiments with capitalism have been permitted, the coast has everything to lose. Even smugglers stand to lose. Goods that they run in from Taiwan, just across the straits, are the main stock of the local entrepreneurs. So it's understandable that officials are playing up the area's glorious potential and trying to forget Tiananmen Square. Street banners, which in Beijing tell people to love the army, here tell them to go to the local trade fair. The wanted posters are not for student leaders, but for common criminals. It does seem that in this part of the country anyway, life has pretty much returned to normal. But the definition of normal has changed. It is normal now to visit the local tourist attraction and find that members of the People's Liberation Army are the main sightseers. To push one's way through the teeming streets of coastal towns and find no foreigners at all. It is normal now in the bustling city of Xiamen to see construction projects stalled. Money has dried up. Forget about new ventures.
It's the outsiders who were on the verge of investing that are having all kinds of second thoughts.
The local economy is beginning to feel the impact. Business is bad, the shopkeeper admits. Says another, very few customers come after the turmoil in Beijing. Whether because of lack of information, propaganda, or fear, many people here say they blame the students for their problems. The man who runs this luxurious and largely empty hotel is angry. At first, I sympathized with the students, he says, but now I think they were used. Because of the troubles in Beijing, I lost $370,000 just since June. The party line is that those bad times now are over. The official newspaper pronounced that local trade fair a big success, claiming that millions of dollars in new contracts were signed, that 2,000 foreigners attended. But an unauthorized and admittedly hasty visit one afternoon turned up no foreigners at all, and certainly no one interested in the bizarre display sent down from the central government in Beijing. But perhaps the display is fitting, considering the toll the use of force has taken on China, on people and places far away from Tiananmen Square, far away from the old men in Beijing. Susan Spencer, CBS News, Xiamen, China.
Our dentist gave us the word about healthier teeth and gums.
Baking soda. So we tried Arm & Hammer Dental Care, the baking soda toothpaste with fluoride.
A survey shows 2 out of 3 dentists and hygienists recommend baking soda for healthier teeth and
There's a parade
gums.
today in a little English town. The Royal Marine Band marched through the streets exactly 1 week after an Irish Republican Army bomb struck at the heart of the band and the town. Anthony Mason reports.
The band that marched out of the Royal Marines School of Music in Deal this morning was missing nearly a third of its members. It may sound a little strange, an officer said, but we had to do it. The parade was a matter of honor, a gesture of defiance. Gaps were left in the ranks for the 3 flautists, 2 clarinetists, a drummer, a tuba player, 10 musicians in all who were killed last Friday when an IRA bomb blew apart the band's recreation barracks. The small seaside town of Deal closed its schools and shops today in tribute. These were their boys, their band.
Being brought up with the Marines, we feel forward and they're part of Deal, they're part of us.
This morning, police were still questioning townspeople about the bombing. They believe a summer house across from the music school was rented by 2 IRA members, but the owner could give them only vague descriptions. The Marines' commandant was more specific.
We are talking about murderers, and of course we are talking about cowards. In fact, we are talking about the scum of the earth.
In their instruments, at least, band members had a peaceful means of retaliation. And today the Royal Marines played the loudest and strongest marches they knew.
Hitler never got us, and Irishmen will never get us. Don't you worry, we're too brave for that.
The few who didn't march went to Wales for the first burial of a band member, a 22-year-old musician. He joined the Marines to learn the trumpet. Anthony Mason, CBS News, Deal.
And that's part of our world tonight. Bob Schieffer will be here with the news tomorrow evening, and then later tomorrow night, we hope you'll watch Saturday Night with Connie Chung. That's at 10, 9 Central Time. I'll see you again Monday. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. Good night.
National power of 4th-ranked Auburn collides with undefeated Tennessee, gunning to get into the top 10 tomorrow on CBS Sports.
This is CBS.